All right, guess we're ready. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's TAC meeting. So first up is the approval of the TAC agenda for today, April 22nd, 2024. Can I get a motion to approve today's agenda?
Motion approved. I'll second.
We have motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed? All right. Next, we have the approval of the TAC meeting minutes for March 24th, 2024. Anybody like to make a motion?
So moved.
We have a motion
Second.
and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed? All right, thank you. Next, we have director's report. Chad, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, members of the Technical Advisory Committee. We have a few reports to report to you. A few items that Peter is up for the first two items. The TIP project status, and then Peter did a great job in getting these. He writes a code to get these reports. So cool how he writes the programming code to make this update. So let's welcome Peter to give an update on this.
Good morning. So on page 23 of the WAMPO tip policy, it requires our bi-monthly progress reports for projects programmed to receive WAMPO suballocated federal funding in the current federal fiscal year, or if they received it in a past federal fiscal year, but haven't yet completed. And so every couple months when I've updated our committees on this, I always run down through the projects highlighted in yellow. And those are projects that are programmed to receive WAMPO awarded federal funding this year. And in order to make that a bit more visual, because it's a bit exciting, we're getting these projects awarded funds and they're starting to become built. We'll kind of go through here real quick. So we have Hayesville, Seneca, and 63rd Street and Bike Ped Pathway, which is currently on track for a completion date in summer of 2024. We have the Safe Routes to School Planning Assistance. We're in the final stages of developing that RFP, anticipated obligation date 2024, to be determined on our anticipated completion and let dates. For the Which Way Video Wall project, anticipated obligation date is April and completion date in October of 2024. For the Nelson Drive realignment, anticipated to obligate this summer and anticipated to complete in December of 2025. For the Keachine Road intersection, anticipated obligation date is in June with an anticipated completion date spring of next year. And then we have the 53rd Street Oliver to Woodlawn multi-use path. Still to be determined. According to my most recent correspondence with them, though, they're in the final planning stages and final Q&A internal analysis. And then finally, the multimodal facility anticipated obligation date was at February 2024, anticipated completion date in July of 2025. And all of these items, we send out emails to all of the relevant project sponsors, and they always give us their good faith estimates on when they think all of these things will be obligated, let, and completed. And then in addition, on that same chart that we always create for these bi-monthly updates, below the highlighted in yellow are those projects that have been previously awarded WAMPO suballocated funding, but just have not completed yet at this time. And then of course we have our map that contains all of those projects that you can see here before you, also in your packet as well. And then finally, we have the WAMPO list of non-suballocated funds in the WAMPO tip after Amendment 7. So this is beyond just the funds that were WAMPO awarded. You can see here there's quite a bit of investment by our different sponsors and state sponsors throughout the WAMPO region. Any questions for me on the bi-monthly tip update?
Thank you, Peter. The next item we have is project selection committee meetings. It's a great challenge, and for project selection committee to make decisions when the funding is limited. and then projects are many projects that are needed to be built and completed. So Peter will update on those meetings and the amounts.
So our project selection committees, they are currently in the process of coming up with award recommendations for the following available funding. So we have, you can see here before you, the TIP available funding for the new 2025 to 2028 TIP. And then they're also looking at prioritizing funding in the MTP for the different MTP time bands that you can see in the table below there. And then I know this has come up quite a few times, but these are the projects we considered for WAMPO suballocated funding by member jurisdiction. There's 102 between all the different sponsors there. And then, of course, we have this map, and this map is also available online where you can see it broken out by an interactive map where you can actually click on the project with a few details, or if you want to see a map by each jurisdiction and which projects they've submitted for the combined call for projects. Our next steps, we had our first PSC meeting on April 4th. We have our next meeting scheduled for Friday on the 26th, and then another one scheduled for Monday on April 29th. Once we develop the PSC develops their funding recommendations and funding priorities for the MTP, the next step will be TAC recommendation and then a TPP vote and approval. Any questions for me on the call for projects?
Can you remind me, in the MTP, are there projects that you don't think are gonna make it in the MTP?
In the MTP, we'll have a list of projects that are selected. We, of course, calculated, how much WAMPO suballocated funding that we believe that we'll get based on a 1% growth rate of that funding for WAMPO. With the amount of projects submitted, not every single project could be considered necessarily for WAMPO suballocated funding because there's more project costs than there are projected WAMPO suballocated federal funding. They will be included in the MTP in an illustrative list and still be available for other federal funding sources. But there are more projects at this time than there are a total amount of projected WAMPO funding.
So more or less, you're gonna have two lists, some that are being considered for suballocated funds moving forward and some that are not.
Sorry. Yes, we'll have two lists in there. And then Allison, you can go ahead.
Yeah. So have we, and as we're talking about programming the long range plan and picking projects for that, have you given us the revenue projections for all federal funds? Because the long range plan is not the mechanism for programming suballocated funds. The long range plan should be selecting projects for all the revenue that's coming and expected to come to the WAMPO region. So as we're selecting projects, we need to see what projected revenues are over the course of the plan for all funding categories. And I personally haven't seen that yet. And I might have missed it. But we do need those revenue projections.
Nick is developing a set of revenue projections for all federal funds in the region, and that will also be included in the MTP. We just have also a list of projects that can be considered for the WAMPO suballocated funding and a separate category. But we will have, the total
But
list
we
of federal.
shouldn't be picking projects for the long range plan until we have all the revenues. So we look at all the revenues available for KDOT projects and all the funding in the region for local projects. So we really shouldn't be moving forward with selecting projects for the long range plan until we know how much money is coming to the region.
That sounds good, Allison. And the last cycle, Corey Davis from KDOT has helped us with the revenues from KDOT side. This time on this cycle, we need each other to help each other, how much revenue KDOT anticipates for the Wichita region in the next.
Yeah, and I've provided that, but you should also be making revenue projections on the local side. So,
We have all those, Allison, Nick has all those, and Nick, did you provide to Allison before? Okay, so we will do that,
Well,
Allison, as quickly as
and
possible.
not just for me, but everyone needs to see the revenue projections so that you know how much you're working with for the long range plan. Because remember, the long range plan is not actual real dollars to spend. So you should be picking projects for the whole region that fit into the entire revenue that's coming to the region.
We are well aware of that, Allison. At the moment, we are looking at all aspects. Today, it so happens that we are looking at suballocated, but we have all in perspective.
Okay, well, if that could be provided to the PSC before Friday, because we really shouldn't be picking projects until we know what that revenue is.
Okay.
Any other questions for me?
I got a question, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind. I'm looking for WAMPO ID 40-511 in the WAMPO projects for MTP consideration. Having a hard time finding it on there.
WAMPO 40-511.
Yeah, it looks like maybe it's on Maple Street. I'm not sure. West side of town.
What was that again?
40-511.
I believe you are referring to the Maple Street Pathway project that's submitted by Sedgwick County to be carried over into the new TIP and MTP unchanged because they're not requesting any additional funding besides what they have already been awarded. That would be why you're not seeing it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Okay. Any other questions for me?
Thank you, Peter. Appreciate it. And then next we have Safe Streets for All grants, and we came a long way with developing comprehensive safety action plan. And WAMPO staff were committed in the next steps of how the awareness of safety can be in all jurisdictions and communities as well. So we have our multimodal transportation planner, Kim Newfield, helping with many areas of safety. Kim, please help us update.
Yes, good morning. We are working with several of the jurisdictions that were awarded funding in the demonstration grant to get those projects identified. We are currently still working with the Federal Highway Administration to figure out the actual eligibility for the projects and also how the funding mechanisms will all work. So thanks, Jolene, for meeting with me recently, but trying to get all these projects figured out so that we can get the agreement finalized with the Federal Highway Administration and get them actually on the ground. So excited about that. In addition, we are submitting a smaller implementation grant application this year. We do plan to submit a much larger, robust application for 2025. But these were actual implementation projects. So these are the actual improvements, not just the demonstration of them. So if you have any projects that you would like to include in that application for consideration, please just let me know. And it is due May 16th, so it's coming up super quick. So.
Kim, I have a question.
Yes.
For these that are for the implementation, were they not required to go through the, I think mid-April, they had a requirement that all prospective projects be submitted. So that doesn't apply to the projects going.
The April requirement was to ensure that our comprehensive safety action plan met the guidelines to allow us to submit projects for the grant. So we did submit that. to the federal government and haven't heard back. But we are hopeful and that, our CSAP will meet all the eligibility requirements to allow us to proceed with the grant application. So it wasn't for the individual projects. It was just for the overall safety action plan.
Thank you for the.
So as long as the projects, fit under those strategies identified in the plan, we're good. So,
Thanks so much, Kim.
yes.
Next we have Dora updating on status of automatic bike counters. Thank you, Dora.
Thank you. Good morning. So earlier this year, WAMPO released an RFP for the automatic bicycle and pedestrian video counters, and the steering committee chose a vendor. So we're currently working on our contract at the moment to send to KDOT. Once we have more updates, we'll sure to bring it back to TAC and then take it to TPB for approval. Any questions, comments? Thank you.
Thank you, Dora. Next we have, several initiatives that WAMPO has undertaking. So those are in the form of request for proposals. So Peter is here back updating on those. Thank you, Peter.
Hello again. So go over the list here of what we have upcoming. So we're planning for our intelligent transportation system, our ITS architecture, planning on hiring a consultant to assist in the development of an updated ITS regional architecture and to complete a comprehensive assessment and inventory of the current region. Our travel demand update phase 2 project, we're aiming to secure expert technical support from a consultant to keep the model up to date, train WAMPO staff on its use, and provide on-call technical support to generate model outputs as needed and recommend any improvements. And then, of course, we have our SRTS, or Safe Routes to School Planning Assistant. We are currently seeking a consultant to assist in development of SRTS plans for all the schools and school districts in the region. And then finally, as Kim was just mentioning, we're working on our Safe Streets and Roads for All implementation grant application. We want to hire, when we plan to reapply for the implementation grant again, because the grants are so competitive, we want to issue an RFP for a consultant to help develop a grant application for the 2025 round of funding. Any questions for me?
Please go ahead with next item.
Okay, and then we have the TIP Amendment 8 public comment period. It will begin on May 3rd and go through May 17th. Just as an FYI. I think that.
Thank you so much. And with that, Mr. Chair, thank you.
All right, thank you. And thank you for all that. Thank you for all the comments. So next we have the public comments. Are there any members of the public that would like to speak about anything on the agenda or off the agenda? I'll give you 3 minutes. Anybody online that would like to speak? All right, seeing none. Next is our action. So the first up we have is the congestion management process. We have Mike Malone and Lonnie Berkland.
Good morning. Great to be here today. Bright sunny day. It's always awesome to be in Wichita. Lonnie and I are going to be up here a couple of times today, both on this topic and one of the next topics. So I'm going to turn the quick update on the CMP process over to Lonnie, and then you'll see us both, along with Paul, who's on the phone, tag team the next item.
All right. Well, good morning. I think most of you have seen lots of information on our CMP prior, but Lonnie Berkland with JEO Consulting. I just want to bounce through a few slides again that we've presented to TAC and both TPB just in preparation for that approval action on. So if you recall, congestion management process was one of those primary tasks, kind of sidebar effort as part of the TDM update that we engaged in. And it's really intended to be, development of a set of tools that you can look at to evaluate projects, recommend projects, things structured around mitigating congestion in the region. So Of course, takes advantage of lots of up-to-date data in that congestion realm and helps you to assess those specific strategies again to sort of combat congestion moving forward in your long-term plan. There is an 8-step FHWA recommended process. We kind of talked before. The good thing is it's not overly prescriptive, so you are able to here locally develop your own congestion management process and apply certain performance measures and those tools as you move forward. In terms of regional, objectives, it was coordinated with your MTP 2050. So those items highlighted there, of course, are always consistent when you're talking about transportation system improvements, and it's no different in terms of congestion management. So improving safety and efficiency, reliability, and increasing overall mobility out there on the network. We defined that CMP network with the stakeholders. And so really when you think about congestion in Wichita, we're looking at analyzing data, reviewing projects and programs and things that are geared at primarily the arterial system and then also the major collectors in the region as well. In terms of performance measures, I won't bounce through all those individually, but there are some required federal performance measures that are in that document, in that process. There's also a few more localized parameters that we put in there that staff and the group can review, can check in on how well are those projects being managed, how well are you moving the needle on congestion in the Wichita area MPO. So as part of that process, if you remember, we did some outreach and we're able to align some really nice surveys with the other MTP process going on. The good thing about all of it was in meeting with agency stakeholders, we identified a list of, those typical congestion locations, took some surveys about those locations, different strategies that would work, and both between the public and the agency stakeholders, there was pretty good alignment, pretty good consistency in those overall results when we talked about CMP. Talked a little bit previously about use of tools and data sets. The National Performance Management Research Data Set is one moving forward that staff will be able to use to pull down some various statistics. Of course, the travel demand model, as we talked about that previously, it allows us to focus in, look at some of those hotspot locations under future traffic volume scenarios, and a little later we'll kind of show some of those tools as well within just that TDM environment. This I think just highlights at the end of the day, the overall CMP, that congestion management process is really geared towards identifying different strategies again to keep Wichita in a good area, in a good space, which we most heard from people right now that there doesn't seem to be a lot of really bad congestion. It's some peak hour and most of it's caused by some of those sort of non-recurring sources as well. And so being able to incorporate these strategies into your MTP and into the TIP, at the end of the day, you want to help fund and implement any of those projects and programs, and then just continue onward, as we discussed previously, to evaluate as you start to get a better sense of what tools really move the needle on congestion. How can you kind of rely on a really good set of strategies? Things like the which way TMC, some of those other items that we talked about before, doing quick clearance, some of those things that seem to be really helpful locally. Developing out that sort of briefcase of tools will be helpful in the region. So in terms of what's next, Peter's going to bounce up, I think, but it's up for your advisory committee recommendation, and then we'll be back in front of the TPB for approval here in the middle of May. So with that, I thank you very much.
Thank you, Lonnie. And so that brings us to our congestion management process action options. So We can recommend the TPB approve the congestion management process as presented. Recommend they not approve the CMP or the congestion management process, or recommend approval with specific changes. Staff recommends the TPP approve the congestion management process as presented.
So would anybody like to recommend approval of the for the TPB approve the congestion management process?
Mr. Chair, I got a question or two.
Sure.
Just a couple of questions. Obviously, most of the congestion is going to be within the metro. Are we looking at congestion points in some of our suburban areas as well? The snapshots maybe don't indicate that perhaps, but I'm guessing there could be some material that's not included in this report that we're just maybe not seeing.
We can use as Lonnie was mentioning, we can actually utilize the travel demand model to try to look at some of those areas. But yes, when you are looking at a priority list of volumes and capacities, your highway systems are usually going to bubble up to the top, especially for peak hour congestion. But there are tools we can use to look at that and to evaluate those suburban areas and high traffic areas outside of the metro area.
Thank you, Peter. And also, it's on page 15 that suburb areas, congested locations also is illustrated. For example, the yellows indicate green is, not so congested, but yellows and reds are also in suburban areas. And those are also in Goddard and other places as well. So those are there in maps and illustrated as well. And it's comprehensive. It encompasses entire region.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions? If not, would somebody like to make a recommendation?
Recommend TPB approve the congestion management process as presented.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, thank you. All right, next we'll move on to the discussion and updates. We have the travel demand model update.
All right, thank you. Again, my name is Mike Malone, and actually, we're going to give an update on several items related to the travel demand model update. There's 4 items, and Paul, can you hear us? I know you were having Paul Ricotta with Caliper, who's been a key member of our team, is on the phone remotely, and I think he's had some technical difficulties. So I'm just checking to make sure he's with us and can hear us. Maybe he's not there. Maybe you're muted, Paul.
Paul, we couldn't hear you. Can you hear us okay, Paul?
If not, I can cover his slides. He just had a couple of slides and he was telling me that he was having trouble logging in, so he may or may not have been able to stay on. I think he's on a school visit with his daughter in Utah. So, who knows? He might be skiing by now. I'm not sure. Anyway, we have several items that we're going to give an update on. The travel demand is one of those, and then you'll hear from Lonnie and myself on the last 3 items that are shown on this slide. And these are all relatively brief, so won't take too much of your time. Relative to the travel demand model. Yeah. Yeah, can you hear us, Paul?
Yeah, I think the host unmuted me, so I think I'm fine now.
Okay, well, I am on the first of your 2 TDM slides. I'm not sure you have video, right?
Right, but I could talk about them. I know them pretty well.
All right, so go ahead. I'm on the first slide.
Okay, so I think the slide that you're looking at shows a couple of flow maps that we developed for the base year and for the future year, which is 2050 at this point. So this includes all the projects that are put into the TIP for the long range transportation plan. So we worked with WAMPO staff to put those in and had some pretty successful times doing that, and we're happy about that. But basically, just to give you a quick update where we are on the model. So the model update was completed in about February, mid-February, and it looks at a base year of about 2022. So we're using some pretty recent data, and we've already been working with the model and applying it on numerous initiatives, both in WAMPO and actually helping out KDOT on a couple things as well. So the model definitely represents a major step forward for WAMPO, we believe. It has a lot of nice features in it that weren't included before. It accounts for some of the changing dynamics due to the pandemic, so things like remote working and things like that. So we account for that remote working by different industries, so that's pretty nice. We've been using the model as well for the CMP, so there's some of the supporting items that you see in the CMP came out of the model. And we're also presently using it on the environmental justice analysis. So that's kind of what we're up to right now with it. And I think if you want to go to the next slide, Mike, that would be good.
All right, I've got the next slide up.
Okay, so the next slide indicates or shows what the model interface looks like. So you can see it's laid out in a step-by-step process using a flowchart interface, and that flowchart interface is completely integrated within the modeling software environment, which is Transcat in this case, and it allows us to manage different scenarios, different configurations of the network, or different configurations of the land use, or both, whatever it might be. And the interface is very intuitive, very easy to use. So you can just run different models and different scenarios right on the fly. And it also includes a lot of ways to do some post-processing and create maps like the ones you saw on the previous slide. And the nice thing about this is that interface is completely built into the software. So there's really not a lot of programming that has to be maintained moving forward. So it should ease the model update process significantly, particularly on the interface side. So this functionality is completely built into the software. There's no external programming or leaving it to the consultant to do programming to run the model. So it's all very good in that respect and very robust. So at the present time, the staff has the model. They've been familiarizing themselves with its operation. We've done one training session. We will continue to support WAMPO with any other training and support needs going forward. We know the project is sort of wrapping up here at the end of April, but we're definitely on board to do that as needed too. So that's kind of where we are, and we're pretty happy with the overall result of the model. It seems to be quite responsive, sensitive to different inputs, the way it should be, responding correctly. And it has a lot of nice advanced features that not overly complicated, but it significantly moves the needle forward with respect to some of the more interesting and state of the practice type things that are going on in the modeling world. So with that, I'll send it back to Mike.
All right, thank you, Paul. We'll go through the couple of remaining items, and then we'll certainly be available to answer any questions on any of the topics that we covered. So similar to the congestion management process, the environmental justice analysis was again kind of a standalone element of the travel demand model update, not necessarily modeling related, but certainly the model was part of the support that we used in developing the environmental justice document. So with that, I'm going to let Lonnie kind of give you a quick overview of that.
Yeah, I'll just bounce through a couple exhibits quick. As Mike mentioned, the environmental justice analysis was another, kind of sidebar task, good data-driven task that we worked with Paul and with the travel demand model on, utilize that basically to dig in a little bit and get some results. And so really that analysis was conducted by analyzing what we define as a degree of disadvantage from available data in the WAMPO census tracts and some of that block group data. And I'll touch about that in a little bit more on the next slide. Overall objective of the analysis, though, was really to look at kind of both base conditions and compare that to future scenarios. So when you've got those projects planned, really as is what's shown in the text box there, to avoid any or minimize or mitigate any of those disproportionately health or environmental effects, including social and economic effects on both minority populations and low income populations. And so basically the analysis uses this idea of degrees of disadvantage. And so we're able to pull census tracts to look at where there's a concentration of minority populations in the WAMPO region and also those low-income populations. And so when we do that, we're able to then use the model, the travel demand model, to overlay the traffic analysis zones, or the TAZs, on those census tracts. And so what's shown in there in the smaller blue graphic is where we defined either 0, 1, or 2 degrees of disadvantage. So a degree of 1 would mean within that TAZ, there was either than a higher than average proportion of minority population or low income population. Where it shows up as a degree of 2, it had both a combination of minority and low income. So once we've kind of got that mapping exercise done, there's a way that we can statistically run a whole bunch of these accessibility measures. So you see those 8 accessibility measures that are there, and basically the goal is to ensure that projects in the TIP or your MTP basically, again, do not have a disproportionate adverse effect on those versus anywhere else in the region. And so it's looking at things like, from those areas, when you do a project, does it have impacts on accessibility to jobs, accessibility to shopping, or to universities and things of that nature. And so when we run those stats, we can pull that down and indicate that based on that project list, that there aren't disproportionately larger impacts to those disadvantaged areas. And so that's a useful tool. It's been a good task, and we've got a tech memo and the various Excel files and things that we worked with Paul on to run that analysis, share that information. So that's a quick update, on environmental justice analysis. I'll let Mike kind of finish up.
All right. So last 2 topics, as you heard, both Paul and Lonnie kind of referred to, we're kind of in the home stretch in terms of the model development. The model was used in doing some of the scenario and testing of alternatives for the MTP. So one of the other uses of the model, of course, is to make it available for WAMPO partner requests. So we wanted to talk a little bit about some of the, some of the reminders in terms of what are good model applications versus what perhaps are not good model applications. And so this stuff was shared, I think, very early on in the project, and there's some information like it on the website, but that 3rd or 4th bullet kind of talks about regional transportation system needs. And in a nutshell, that's what the model is for, is kind of big picture things, adding lanes, adding capacity, testing road diets, certainly testing the impacts of rerouted traffic if you have detours or road closures or bridge closures. Certainly, if you wanted to look at new connections, new links in the roadway, alternative interchange configurations, those are kind of the big picture things that the model is good at, and sort of the comparative analysis that the model can do. Also at the bottom of that slide is select link and select zone analysis. So those are kind of 2 fancy terms for, basically if you have a specific link in the model, just a specific, let's say, mile of major arterial, you can assess where are the traffic loadings from that link coming from. You can also test specific zones. So if we have a specific zone or an industrial development or a large commercial development, you could evaluate where the trips that are either destined for that zone or based in that zone, where they come from or where they go to. So those are kind of the big picture elements that the model is good at. What the model can support, but necessarily isn't great at, is doing operational level analysis. So the travel demand model is a macroscopic model. So we're talking about daily volumes or maybe even peak period volumes, but they're not at the level yet that we can use them for operational analysis or traffic simulation, or even to evaluate the impacts of small developments. And what I mean by that is, if there's a quick shop going in, or even a small residential development or something like that, the influence of something like that is not going to be seen in the model. It's more beneficial if you're looking at a large development, thousands of units or hundreds of, maybe thousands of acres even. That's the kind of thing that at a regional level, the model can help you assess. So those are just kind of some reminders. As you make requests or may make partner requests, or you have other consulting projects even going on, those are kind of some reminders just in terms of what the model's good at and what it isn't so good at. And as part of that process, we also threw together a couple of slides regarding post-processing of traffic data and basically getting to the point where you've got certified traffic counts. So what we mean by that is as I noted, the model has daily volumes and maybe peak period models or peak period numbers for existing or future years, but it's not necessarily, the raw data is not necessarily ready right away for operational analysis or quarter level planning or design applications, or, maybe you've got some transit applications of some sort, but all of those things really require the model data to potentially be adjusted. And I'm not saying that every single application requires modification, but the typical adjustment factors that need to be made are things like peak hour factor, directional distribution factors, so that we can take those link volumes and assess, how much of that volume happens during the peak hour, which direction are they going? There could perhaps be seasonal adjustments if there's areas of the community where there's, significant school impacts, or even recreational vehicle patterns that are important, to get down to the point where you got peak period flows that can be used at an operational level. Heavy vehicles, again, it might be a significant factor in some areas of the community, as might multimodal aspects, whether you're looking at specific transit elements or even pedestrian routings. And those aren't things that the model is necessarily super strong at, but there are elements in the model that address those things. So if you're looking at specific applications, we would want to make sure that those adjustments can be made to the raw model volumes that you might be using for your project analysis purposes. And with that, that's kind of a quick overview of these last remaining items that we're working on. So, Paul, as he noted, he's kind of in the final stretches in terms of model development. We will be finalizing some final tweaks as far as the future year travel demand model, developing some model documentation, which staff has already been involved in training, but developing some documentation that they'll be able to kind of use and own going forward. And then, as Lonnie noted, we'll come back again at the policy body meeting here in a couple of weeks, both for the CMP approval that we talked about today, and then also to give them the same update that we're talking to you about, with maybe some slight revisions as we go forward. That's all we have. If there's any questions, our team would be happy to try to answer them for you.
Any questions for Mike? Just a reminder, there's a link at the bottom of our packet, bottom of this presentation. So there's a lot more information online for the TDM. So
Thank
all
you.
right, thank you. All right, next we have the MTP 2050 Public Engagement Round 2 Results Report. Marky.
Hi, Marky Jonas, Administrative and Public Outreach Coordinator. So I'm just going to kind of go over our second round of public engagement and kind of summarize the results we had for that. So that round of engagement was from December 2023 through February 2024. We used a refined version of the first survey from our first round of engagement, which was last summer. But we refined that just to make it a bit more clear with some of those questions. And then we also added questions about performance measures. We collected a total of 171 surveys, which were made available in English, Spanish, and Vietnamese, and were posted online and advertised on social media. And then we also attended numerous events throughout the community to engage with the public, tell them about WAMPO and our upcoming MTP. And then I will just say, before getting into more of the results, that it is a small sample size. So it's not necessarily reflective of the entire WAMPO region. And of course, we do have more engagement with people that are advocates for certain things. For example, with bike ped infrastructure, a lot of the people that are advocates for that are more engaged. And so I think that's worth noting that may have had an effect on some of the results. Okay, so the survey consisted of 10 questions about transportation statistics and attitudes towards the transportation network and 5 demographic questions. And then we also had a map activity where attendees were able to mark areas of concern, either for congestion or safety. And then we also did have a kids survey that we did, and we did some other kids engagement, including going to some classrooms and teaching them about transportation planning, which was really fun. And the results of that will be analyzed and put in an appendix of the completed document. So rather than go through every question and read those all to you, I'm going to focus on 3 of the questions that really give an overall snapshot of what the results found. So those questions are, what transportation improvements are most important to you? What types of transportation do you use? And an open-ended question inquiring about the transportation challenges or issues experienced by people in the WAMPO region. And these questions, as you'll see, they reveal the themes of the current use of the transportation system and a regional desire for the future. And then the full results are linked in your packet and available on the website. So here's the first question, which is, what transportation improvements are most important to you? And participants were able to select 3 of the 9 options. And what's the most notable, I think, is that 46% of those respondents selected reduce fatalities and serious injuries. And then the next most common responses were improve access to basic human needs and services, 44%, increase opportunities for public transit, 35%, and maintain and expand the existing bike and pedestrian infrastructure, which was 33%. And then these 2, I know there's a lot on this page, but these show, the first one is the primary types of transportation. So the survey, people could select their primary, sometimes, seldom, and never for the different modes of transportation. And this one shows pretty clearly that the personal vehicle is the primary mode of transportation in the region. And then you can see on the other side of that for the challenges that people had with transportation, that public transit is the one that was the most notably selected, with 35% saying that they had some sort of issues or concerns with the current public transit. So this full report summary and the summary from the first round, they are both available on the website. And then they will both be in an appendix as well. And then our next round, for next steps, we will be doing a 3rd round of public engagement. The dates are still a bit tentative, but coming up in the spring or summer of 2024, and that will really be focused on the different modes of transportation and the current use right now in the WAMPO region. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't see any questions.
All right,
I
thank you.
appreciate your presentation. All right, next we have Jeremy Hill with the Wichita State University's Center for Economic Development and Business Research. Talk to us about population projections.
All right, well, it's exciting to be back here. Some of you might not have know that I used to sit over here on the side of the room. So let me give you a little bit of background. I think most people in the room know the Center for Economic Development. We do a lot of forecasts. Some background. We did a previous forecast. We are actually the census provider of population forecasts for Kansas, for every single county. In this process, we did one just for WAMPO, right? And in that process, the objective was to help the TMD model, and we wanted to capture where those growths were. When we first did it, we did it by the whole region and said, hey, we really need it more granular. So we had our previous model. We wanted to figure out how to make it more granular, where it would go to. And so we did this model that would go around existing centers and to let it grow out further and further from those. And while that is a very valuable tool and it has more realistic of where those growth will be, because we have a lot of sprawl in all of these communities, what it didn't do is it actually doesn't add in annexation. So although the cities, when they looked at it at their own side, they didn't see all these other growth around it. So it didn't really get captured to those cities. Still in those proximate areas, it just didn't get captured. So a lot of concerns were raised because of that. And so what's our goal today? So what we're going to do is I'm going to give you a different alternative forecast, propose it. You can give as much feedback, give as much thought as you want. talk about some of those expectations. And then I also think it's important to always have limitations, because the reality is in economics, there's always limited resources, right? We can't have everything. So I'm going to build some of that in here. All right, I see we have some young people in here. Do you guys relate to this? No? All right, well, we did this slide last summer. This is just the overall understanding of how we do our population. We use an age cohort design, right? And I won't do all the antics I used for this. Here's the reality. We use the actual age structure of every single county, and what we want to do is this applies down to each city. The part of this is everyone gets older except for me in this thing, right? We have fertility. And fertility you can only have fertility if you have women of a certain age, and fertility changes by race. Then we have mortality. Everyone dies except for, my spouse says she's never going to die. And then you have migration. People move it in and out, things like that, right? So that's the underlying thing. We make some adjustments to our forecasts. What's captured? There's a lot of things actually captured in this age cohort. What's labor demand, industries, consumer preferences, community vitality. One community really making investments. Those are all actually being captured in it. What's not captured is tornadoes, oil, commodities, all kinds of things that we can't forecast. So will we capture everything? Absolutely not. But will it give us a pretty good idea? The reality is most people don't get up and move around as much as you think they do. They move within a region, but they don't move in and out of regions very fast. So our regional economy, which is multiple cities and our surrounding counties, are our own economic unit. The reality of increasing that would take a lot of people moving in or moving out. The reality is the actual migration is pretty limited. It is mostly us getting older, living longer, having babies is the biggest effect to anything. Our previous forecast was now old. We said Kansas was going to grow by 0.4%, but guess what? We had some slowing economies in Kansas. The US is actually slowing. People are making less babies. We got some young people over here. You guys have a lot of duties to get more babies in this region if you want it to grow faster. So our forecast is actually slowing down to 0.3%. And if you remember, you saw some news even for Wichita, we went down to 0%. So we had some slow periods of time. Anyway, I'm not going to give you all these details. You can go to our website if you want to know the underlying ones. For this area, we actually have it shifting. And if you want to know the details of why we're slowing and then maybe be growing again, we do have some fundamental changes. Our industries are in an upward business cycle when they weren't before. So we actually have a stronger growth for this region than the state. So we're having a faster growth and faster than our recent history. Here's what I suggest to do. Last time I did it for the whole region, and then we said, hey, we want these growth poles. Where are those cities? We're going to have that continued effect of moving to the suburbs of each of those communities, which is other little neighborhoods or block groups around there. So here's what I'm suggesting is that we take this, instead of doing this for the whole region, we'll push this model all the way down to all the cities and look at their population, their characteristics of race and gender and so forth, and age them up. So you see this aging population, everyone's going to die eventually. We have fertility. And the one big element here is migration. How are we moving around? So suggesting pushing this down. And then for this migration, here's this idea. And this is actually within line that we do from the census across the whole US. You can look at community net migration. What has happened over the last 5 years? Well, we can actually look at net migration. How many people, it doesn't matter if they moved within the county or within a city, we can see that net migration in. So you can see on the very left, it says 60%. Then we could add in building permits. So some communities have had a lot more aggressive building permits and growth. This would say, hey, we're making investments in our community. And then you can add in a third one, which is an employment forecast, which the center can do, saying, hey, let's look forward a little bit, say, because of your industries, because of your community, what's the likelihood growth of employment that would attract even more demand? So that is one. And some communities might not want to provide some of the building permits, which is fine. In that case, I would suggest we do 80% of community net migration, no building permit, and then still do our 20% employment forecast the center just does. So this would give a lot of context of what has been happening in each community and a little bit of, hey, what could happen in this community element to it. So start thinking of those questions, how you might want to talk about that. I will say, because because I talk about economics, there's always constraints. This region will only grow so fast because we only have so many builders who can build houses, right? This region can only grow so fast because there's only so many people giving babies, right? We can only have so many babies at a certain period of time, and we're not gonna birth anything faster, and they're gonna take, unfortunately, 18 years for my kids to get out of the house. So that ain't gonna go any faster. So we have some constraints. So I thought we'd then come back and say, hey, we'll use our previous forecast, which is more optimistic than our growth has been, and say that is the top growth of this whole region, right? And we take every single town using the 2020 population as a share, and then say, hey, if we, in this new alternative forecast, if we're 100 jobs net short, well, then we just remove it based on the population a little bit. That was my suggestion, so that it comes back in line with our regional forecast and make sure that it's a reasonable longer forecast. Now, will this meet everyone's optimal or desired outlook? No, but it also says, hey, we're all have so much resources available to grow, and where is that resource really going to happen? So that at the end of the day, we have a model that not only captures actual trends in investment, recent ones, some forecasts, but is constrained by that reality, hey, that we're not likely going to grow faster than the US average or than we've had historically, or other MSAs, things like that. That's my idea. Any comments or questions? Concerns? I can go back to that. And this is the one to go back to.
Anybody have any questions for Jeremy?
I think you should sing a song. It's an obvious song you should sing if you.
Song, something about Earth Day, maybe?
No, I'm saying Kuma Matata.
Uh,
No
Russ,
question.
this is Marcy Aycock. I just wanted to tell Jeremy, thank you for this information. I look forward to getting it so I can share it with our REAP member communities.
And we have in this process several dates already lined up with WAMPO to come back and have, we'll redo this forecast and come back. So if you have with REAP, I'm all open to other suggestions. So send it to them immediately. And maybe in your meeting, you can have them sing some songs like Akuma Matata.
Or you could come and lead us, Jeremy. We'd love to have you visit a REAP meeting.
My kids, who I want out the house, does not like me singing. I'm not very talented.
I think Chad's about ready to sing.
Marcy, thank you for comments, and I'll touch base with you on scheduling a time when Jeremy can present at REAP as well. Also want to thank Jeremy, his busy schedule, and he's committed to help us. There were some input that WAMPO staff received from various jurisdictions on population growth, and those inputs were ambitious, and there were some expressed that there are some inconsistencies, but we respected all inputs and we received all the feedback. From WAMPO staff, we want to do the right thing, and we want to get the experts to have these methodology and forecasts completed. So therefore, Jeremy is here. Although the methodology that explained by Jeremy today will be revisited again in the next couple of months, and this will all culminate into our robust agreed upon methodology of forecasting. And there may be some disagreements, but overall, we rely on the experts for the outcome in the end. So just want to share the what's upcoming in the next couple of weeks, next couple of months. And again, thank you for your expertise.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, next we have other business. Do you have any other business? Next we have adjournment. Would anybody like to adjourn today's meeting?
11 o'clock.
Nobody?
What? I'll make a motion to adjourn. I feel like I've made all the motions, so might as well do this one too. Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, we got a motion and a second to adjourn today's meeting. All in favor, say aye. All right, thank you. Have a great day.